Welcome back. Today I've got a special guest that I'm going to be interviewing. His name is Rob, and he is a betrayed male spouse and a great friend. You've already heard from his wife, Melanie, and I trust that that was encouraging and uplifting, but also very insightful for the journey of the unfaithful female spouse. Today you're going to hear from her husband, Rob, who shares his own story. Now, I'll tell you, because we're friends, we had a great time talking. He gets highly emotional during a critical point in his story. And I was so glad that he let his guard down and just simply gave you who he was. If you're a betrayed male spouse, I'm confident this is going to resonate with you. And if you're an unfaithful female, I hope that you hear his heart. I hope you hear what he's saying, but I also hope you hear what he's not saying verbally, but what you hear through his pain, his hurt, and just his ability to convey what a betrayed male goes through. So I hope you enjoy this interview. I'm confident it's going to be a wonderful source of insight for both of you. So Rob, thanks for coming in.
You bet.
When Melanie came in just a short while ago, she was phenomenal. And I've had a ton of feedback that it just brought so much clarity and healing. I think the wonderful thing, there were several wonderful things, but one of the most, I think, key ingredients of Melanie was the fact that she wasn't defensive. She owned what she had done, and she just spoke from her heart. Mm-hmm. And having known you for a while, I know that that's what you're going to do. So why don't you share just a little bit about your story, kind of what you've been through, just some facts so that the listener can kind of go, okay, I get it. Because as a betrayed male spouse, you're a bit of a unique entity. There's not a ton of information out there, and at affairrecovery.com and on my YouTube and Twitter and all that, we're really trying to remedy that because it is a weakness in the world of repair work for infidelity. And number one, I'm so grateful that you would be willing to come in. Number two, I think you have so much to give. So I'm going to get out of the way and let you just take a few moments and share what did go on so the listeners can relate to you.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, let me say I really appreciate the opportunity, Samuel, that not only Melanie had, but also that I have. I appreciate your thought about not having a lot of information about the betrayed male, because I talk to a lot of guys that we kind of feel like we're a mythical creature,
right.
Like we're a Yeti or a Loch Ness monster, and no one can really, understand who they are, what makes them tick. But we'll kind of break that down a little bit. But a little bit of my story. I've been married for now over 30 years. I always thought we had a really good marriage. We had a lot of friends in our friend groups that would always tell us, "Wow, you guys really have something."
Right.
And so one of the common myths is that infidelity happens in bad marriages.
Right.
And
absolutely.
that wasn't my case at all. I thought things were going great. In fact, I probably would have said on a scale of 1 to 10. I had at least an 8.
Yeah.
It wasn't perfect by any means, but wow, the pros totally outweighed the cons, and I was pretty satisfied with our life together, the way we raised our kids. We parented well together. We were good partners, and pretty much all the things that we did.
Right.
And then one day, the world stopped.
And how long ago was that?
It was 2.5 years ago.
2.5 years ago, Melanie comes home, or Melanie drops this nuclear bomb.
So I wish it would have happened that way. It didn't happen that way. I had kind of suspected something was going on in the spring of 2017. I had, had a lot of clues. You always tell you to trust your gut. I had a gut feeling there was something wrong. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I knew there was something wrong. There was something going on. And I even asked her straight up several times over that spring, "Hey, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. No fooling around. Are you having an affair?" that's about as direct as I can be.
Right.
And in all those cases, she looked me right in the eye and said, no. Well, as a guy who's satisfied in his marriage, I believed it. And so, then I'm confused because, wait, my gut's telling me this, but I'm being told this. That doesn't feel right, but okay, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt.
And that's a tough place, because if you talk to 1,000 people, betrayed male and betrayed female, at least 30 to 40% felt like they're telling me one thing, but I'm seeing another.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Right.
And there's things that you can do, but for your situation, there's so many similarities to a betrayed male, but yet there's so many unique elements too.
Right.
And so I just want to validate the fact that that's, I think, one of the most awful things that a betrayed spouse goes through is that perpetual, man, it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So tell the viewers, how did it all come about?
Yeah, so you kind of feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah.
Like, well, wait, nothing in my world really fits well, so something's wrong. So, fast forward a few months, we had just celebrated my parents' 60th anniversary. I have no history of infidelity in my family. We had this wonderful event with my parents, talking about the legacy to leave to your grandkids and your great-grandkids. And, there were people there that had been married 60 plus years celebrating with them, so it was a great event.
Right.
4 days after that event is when D-Day happened. And, my gut kept kind of going into overdrive, like there's really something not right. And some of the things she said just didn't make any sense. I couldn't, put my finger on it, but I knew something was wrong. And so she went to take a shower, her computer was left open, and I hear the ding of Facebook Messenger. Okay, well, it's this guy whose name kept popping up. So while she's in the shower, I looked and I got the confirmation that I needed, that there was at least an emotional affair going on. The things that were said are said by people that are emotionally entangled with each other. The I love yous, all of that stuff. So I had evidence of what I needed. So in my own passive aggressive way, while she was in the shower, I went and packed a bag, didn't know where I was going, but I made sure that she saw the suitcase that I was packing, like I said, in my passive aggressive way. And I walked out the door. I never said a word to her. And I left. Now, I didn't know where I was going.
Right.
All I knew was my world has just come apart, and I have no idea what's going to happen next.
It's interesting that at that moment you didn't rage, lose it, confront her, you just left. Do you think that that's a normal thing that sometimes men do?
Probably, because I think the urge to rage and become just furious and enraged and just go have a nuclear blowout, it's very, very common. But I think, wanting to avoid all of that, because my kids were in the house, I didn't want to, have this big knockdown drag out in front of them. So I quietly exited, but the rage happened next. I went and, I had no idea where I was going. I had a bag packed. I threw a couple of rods and reels in the back of my truck. I didn't know if I was going to stay here or go to the coast. I'm going to go somewhere. I'm not going to go home.
Yeah.
So I sat in the parking lot of my favorite local athletic goods store. And, again, I didn't know where I was going. But what happened next is we started a text war.
Oh, great.
So the nuclear bombs happened in the text war. And we're texting back and forth, and I'm calling her all kinds of names, and she's like, well, no. And so she told me, this is the strange part, the part that I was not prepared for. I knew there was something going on with this current guy. I didn't know quite what, but I could tell that he was more than a friend. What I was not prepared to hear was, she told me, you shouldn't leave me for what's going on with this guy. If you're going to leave me, you should leave me for what I did in the past.
Oh, man.
Whoa. Back up. Hang on. What did you just say?
Yeah.
So over the next hour or so, what unfolded is her confessing to all of her past affairs. And these were things that had gone on. She had an emotional affair 2 years into our marriage. And so, I'm not prepared for any of this. You don't get a manual whenever you get married to tell you how to deal with infidelity. All I knew was at that moment, my life stopped.
Yeah.
Life as I knew it was over. And from this day forward, nothing's ever going to be the same. I, at the time, was an elder in my church, and I knew that we had given out counseling recommendations to people that were in crisis. Well, I never had to use those because I was never in crisis.
Right.
Well, my hair's on fire now, and I'm burning. And so I pulled up the email. I'm an email pack rat, so I keep everything. And I kind of went down the list. First counseling center I call, no answer. All right. Second one I call. Well, we can't get you in for like 4 weeks. And I'm like, 4 weeks? I'm about to jump off the bridge now. I need help talking me off the bridge.
Yeah.
And so if you're not going to help me, my next phone call is to a divorce lawyer, which is funny thinking about it now. I mean, I didn't think through any of this,
Sure.
But I'm making that, I'm going to throw this down. And
you're in chaos.
Yeah. And a divorce lawyer would have told me, hey, slow down.
Yeah.
It's going to be 6 to 18 months before you can even think about this. So then I call my pastor, and I had him come and meet me. And from that point on, I think that's when I was able to get talked off the ledge. Fortunately for me, while we were talking, he texted another guy that I didn't know. I mean, I knew the guy, but I didn't know he had been through the exact same thing that I was going through now. He came and met us as well, and he looked me in the eye, and he told me he knew what I was going through. He then told me his story. How his wife had been unfaithful to him like 6 times. And for the first time in my life, I actually felt the empathy.
And this is the kind of stuff, while you kind of take a moment, I want the listener to understand, if you were to sit in this room with me, my friend Rob has got to be 6'2", 240 pounds. And listen, this kind of pain reduces men to ashes. I said that just recently on a video that I did, and I had a number of people go, look, that's exactly it. You just feel like ashes. Mm-hmm. You can be a millionaire, you can be dirt poor, you can cry in a Mercedes, you can cry in a Ferrari, but
yes.
The fact is, this is awful. This is a level of hurt that I think the only other kind of hurt, especially from a man, that would compare to this is molestation, rape. I mean, this is at some level just such a devastation. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you being just real.
Yeah, I mean, I was never an emotional being before this.
Right.
I cry for commercials now, so
And that's a good segue. So let me ask you, I mean, to launch out into this, I think there's so many betrayed males out there that probably are almost shaming themselves that they're so different now. Mm-hmm. I mean, how has this changed you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was always very confident, very sure of myself. I wouldn't say arrogant, because that really that never was part of my day-to-day rhythm. But I was confident in who I was, what I believed. Never emotional. I never went through life dealing with emotion. I mean, I had no high highs, no low lows. I'm even keel, and what you're going to get from me is the reasoned, mature response, at least what I thought.
Right.
And I realize what a joke that is now, because I got lots of highs and lots of lows. Mm-hmm. and all the pain. Wow, I was never prepared for pain like that. Never had experienced
And so,
pain in general. So,
and that's a good point. Do you think it has changed your ability to relate to people in pain and hurt and crisis?
totally. I think before, I would, if I ever encountered people in pain, it's the kind of typical response would be, "Wow, I'm really sorry about that, but sucks to be you."
Yeah, exactly.
And it never affected me. One thing to note about me is I'm also a cancer survivor, and that experience changed my view of what strong people, courageous people actually look like. And it also gave me, I think, an empathy to be able to reach out to people that are sick,
Yeah.
that I see that have a do-rag on their head because they lost their hair from chemo. Hey, that was me too. And I kind of gravitate to them now, whereas before I would walk on the other side of the street because although I'm sorry that that's affected you, I don't want that to,
I say it this way. I feel like Samantha and I have been unplugged from the Matrix.
Yeah.
Where you're chasing the BMW, the
Yep.
white picket fence, the 2-story, 4,000 square foot home. I feel like we, as survivors of infidelity, certainly me being unfaithful and it's different, but you being a betrayed, this rocks your world where you're like, hold on. What used to be so important
None of it matters.
doesn't mean jack
Right.
anymore.
At all.
And so as a man, talk to me a little bit about the shame. When I post videos on YouTube that kind of reference the betrayed male or what have you, so often betrayed males will reach out to me and go, look, like the shame that I feel as a man, like I appreciate you, Sam, trying to do your best, but it's different for us. And I respect that. I'm not, look, I am fully aware that there are some very similar trends that are true for both betrayed males and betrayed females, but there's some unique elements, and one of those is the way a betrayed male feels and experiences shame for infidelity is different. And I know that you've walked through a library full of revelation and insight, and so why don't you share a little bit what you've had to kind of navigate through?
For a lot of guys that I interact with, guys are isolated anyway. We don't ever talk about our feelings. If we do talk about our feelings, we're seen as weak.
Right.
There's lots of societal stigma against guys talking about their feelings. We're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to man our post. You're supposed to get back to work, do your duty as a good soldier. But the isolation, I think, is further exacerbated when the husband is betrayed, because now I don't really feel like I have anyone I can talk to about this. You talk about all of the normal adjectives that are thrown around, like you were a chump. How could you have let this happen? How could it have happened right under your nose?
This is your fault.
Yeah, it's your fault.
If you were a better husband, if you made more money, all of
Sure.
that stuff, which is all absurd.
It is totally absurd. But that viewpoint, tends to isolate guys even more. So now you're not only isolated from, society, you're like exiled in Siberia. And so you really have no idea where to turn. And I think that add that to the confusion of this man bad, woman good thing that I talked about earlier. Now you're really going nuts. You have no idea what to even do. You start reading articles about infidelity. They're all written for a betrayed female. And although you can bring some of those points to your recovery, it just doesn't resonate. All the stories that are told in books are stories about a husband being unfaithful to his wife, and not the other way around.
It's so good, because here's a good point. What do you feel when you read those things? I mean, because I think it's so good to validate what that makes you feel. Because I know that has to be, the word that comes to my mind is abandoning.
Sure.
Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree with that. I think at this point in our life, our world, I want to be heard.
Yeah.
but I'm being abandoned and isolated further.
And then you go read this stuff and you're
And
like,
I'm like, well,
what the hell?
yeah, why can't I feel that? Because what you're telling me is I shouldn't even exist, but yet I'm feeling all these same things and I don't know what to do with it.
And to me, it seems like that makes you spiral even more.
Totally.
I shouldn't be feeling these things, but I feel these things.
Yes.
Now I'm reading Betrayed Female. This shouldn't even happen. Now I feel like a failure? Or what do you feel like in that moment?
It's not so much feeling like a failure. I feel more like again, this mythical creature. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know where to place myself in society now.
That's a good point.
And so that abandonment, that isolation, the confusion, I add that to all the pain and the trauma that I'm trying to deal with. And, and I said earlier that most guys don't talk about their feelings. I think if you were to poll most guys, they would say, oh, as far as emotions go, there's happy, there's sad, and there's angry. I get the big three. I'm good.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? That was me. Now I'm dealing with all these emotions that I didn't even know exist. And yet I'm isolated, I'm exiled, I have no idea where to even be. So it's hard to kind of navigate through all that.
And one of the people you probably want to talk to is Melanie, but you probably felt like, wait, how do I talk to her, right?
Right.
It's so paralyzing for the betrayed male because you feel like the person that I would probably feel the safest to talk to is Melanie, but yet I can't.
I can't because she's the one that just stabbed me in the heart. So, and knowing the lies and the deception that, I had just experienced, I don't even want to talk to her. In fact, I want to get as far away from her as possible, but yet I need to be with her because she needs to be a part of me recovering and me getting answers to my millions of questions that I now have.
So when was there a lighthouse? When did some light come into the equation for you? What kind of maybe brought some relief in the midst of this colossal crisis?
Yeah, good question. I kind of immersed myself in all things that had to do with infidelity because I'd never had an experience with it. Nobody in my family, that I know of has experienced it. So I don't even know where to start. So I need to start reading books. I got a whole library now of books that I've read. Some good, some not so helpful. Going through counseling as well kind of helped normalize some of the things that I was feeling, which I'd never experienced before. So that was a big help as well. But we went to the EMS weekend, and I think from there that really set me and I guess Melanie as well, and then us together, it set us on a trajectory for recovery. It didn't happen overnight, but it set us on a path. Like I could see there is a way to recover. There is a way to heal. There is a road that I can follow. It's going to be bumpy. And it's going to suck at times.
What about the weekend specifically, and I'm sorry to cut you off, what about the weekend made you go, okay, that's going to help me on the trajectory? What do you think it was?
I think, honestly, it was seeing other couples go through the same thing that we were going through and actually feeling empathy for them. I'm in a room filled with people who are dealing with infidelity. And, it was crazy when I first got there because I thought, what am I doing here?
What a freak show I'm going to with these degenerate people from all over the world. What am I got myself into?
One of the guys from my small group has become my best friend that I never knew in my life until a little over 2 years ago. And we always talk about how the most awkward thing was that first breakfast, looking at each other like, who are you? Which one are you?
And I feel bad. I mean, when I'm at the weekend, I see people walk in and they're just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And then we start talking about football and baseball and sports and trying to help everybody feel comfortable because it's coming, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That cold wind of, man, I wish this was Bitcoin. I wish this was a root canal, anything
Something
of
else.
A seminar rather than infidelity.
Right.
But yet, this is where things started to turn for you.
Yeah. And leaving there, knowing that, okay, now I've got some tools in my bag to be able to process a lot of the stuff I'm trying to work through, but then to be able to learn how to communicate better with Melanie, I think was a big help, because in our history, we never fought. Our style of dealing with things was withdraw. And what I used to say was a badge of honor that we never fought really is probably the worst possible environment that I could have created, that both of us could have created, because it sets this toxic element that never deals with any problem. We just ignore it until it goes away, and then we get back together. Okay, we're good. But we've ignored whatever elephant was in the room. And so learning how to deal with that, and then how to call each other out whenever we feel like we're withdrawing. Hey, are you withdrawing? Yeah. Well, why? And that was never part of our rhythm. We would just isolate, withdraw, done. I'll come back in a day or so. You'll be good. I'll be good. Life's good.
That's the pattern. That's the cycle. And it just debilitates marriages.
Yeah.
And so you're leaving EMS with some tools, which is everything that we want couples to kind of merge to. But here's a good question for you. Whether it be something that you learned in the weekend or whether it just be something that you started to develop, what do you think were some of the most helpful things that you did? If you were to say, man, some things that I did right, like these were, sure, going to the weekend, and I'm not going to turn this into a sales pitch for the weekend, but if you were to talk about, man, a couple things I really did right that I'm glad that I did, what do you think those would be?
Yeah, I think to start out, I think a lot of guys struggle with where to go get help. I was very blessed in that the friend of mine that I was talking about earlier that had been through this before pointed me to counseling and actually got me an appointment that I couldn't get on my own.
That's awesome.
He was there, and on a first name basis, he texted the counselor, hey, 911, I got a hot one. And that was me.
And I just want to intervene and say, look, what a moment. I mean, you teared up earlier talking about that. I didn't have that moment, and so many people don't, but yet, whether you come from faith or not, I just want the listeners to understand, look, there's a way through. I mean, that moment, because you and I come from faith, I mean, that was a shock to you, it was a shock to everybody, but it wasn't a shock to the Lord.
Right.
To those that don't come from faith, look, there's a way through this. Whether you subscribe to divinity, the universe, or are agnostic or atheist, look, I just want to tell you, Rob and I both want to just let you know, there is a way through this. We don't know what the answer is going to be, but as sure as we're sitting here, I'm 14 years, Rob's 2.5 years. There's people all over the world who are right in the middle of their own story. Look, don't give up. I mean, there is a way through for you. And there's an opportunity to get through this. We don't know what's going to happen with your relationship or your marriage.
Right.
But you can heal.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree, I'm diverting here, but would you agree you're never going to be the same again?
No.
But you can be a far more, well, you take it from there.
Yeah, no, that's something that we talk about a lot, is that I almost look at it like my life pre-D-Day and my
Absolutely.
life post. It's like I went into a cocoon and like a butterfly had a metamorphosis, and here I am, someone new. And I liked your analogy earlier about being unplugged from the matrix, is that the stuff that I got uptight about before, none of that matters. Chasing the almighty dollar or whatever. I mean, people would probably say that I've been successful in my career. I've been rewarded and awarded for things that I've done in my career. None of that really matters to me. I look at what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind to my kids.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure I was really concerned about that before. Now, what I'm concerned about is leaving that legacy of honor and character and integrity. And so I think for a lot of guys, though, not knowing where to get help, they kind of wallow for months, maybe even years.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of guys that have said, man, I tried to deal with this on my own for 3 years.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, well, what'd you do? Like, well, I tried to meditate, or I tried to do this or that, but I never really got to the heart of the matter. So I think some of the things that I would say I did right, I was considerate and respectful with all the interaction I had with Melanie. Out of as I got started in the EMS weekend, I did the boot camp. And in the boot camp, you make a commitment. And in my commitment, I said, I promise that I will be considerate and respectful. We're going to talk about some things that are going to hurt.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt me to ask.
Yep.
It's going to hurt you to hear the question. And then it's going to hurt you to respond to my question. And I know it's going to hurt me to hear the answer. But I promise I'll be considerate and respectful. And I kept that promise, and I still do. We would have a lot of what I would call me spouting my word salad.
Nice.
Where I would just, launch into all the thoughts that are going in my head. And it's jumping around, a million different directions, because I'm trying to wrestle these thoughts down. Yeah. And try to get a hold of what just happened.
We call that processing.
Absolutely. I called it word salad. Same thing. And so fortunately, she was very patient with that. And like you said in her interview, she didn't get defensive. She owned it. I think the defensiveness really hurts that whole conversation because I think it kind of sets you back to where you were before. Yeah. And I don't want to go back there. I want to move forward. So,
and would you agree that so many people think, man, I don't want my old marriage back. And some people take an approach that says, oh, that old marriage is done, disintegrated, I don't even count it. And okay, that's I get it. Mm-hmm. But then there's people that go, look, I'm not discounting it, but I don't want to go back to that.
Right.
Did you have the approach that you're like, look, I want a new marriage, I want a new communication? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think at first, I didn't know what I wanted, to be honest.
That's a great point. I think we could stop and say you're exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, prior to this, I mentioned earlier that I was very confident in, who I was, confident in the answers that I had to all of life's tough questions. Who am I? Why am I here? I had all that down, and I had that down for a long time. And coming from a faith background, we even had this conversation probably, 20 years ago, whenever one of our friends experienced infidelity. The comment that I made was, if I ever catch you cheating, you're done.
Yeah.
Because as I read the Bible, it says in the case of divorce, or in the case of infidelity, it's divorce. And so I went through life believing that, not really that it was ever going to affect me, but just that, okay, if I ever get in that spot, this is how I'm going to react. Well, that's not how I reacted.
Yep.
But I had a struggle for a long time. I was very confused about this. It's like, well, what I believed before was this. Was I wrong? Now I got to do a rediscovery of who I am and what do I really believe? What does it really say? And so I think for that perspective, that's a great part of this journey and I think you may have even done a recent video or podcast on this, on who am I now?
Yeah.
Who do I want to be? So for me, and I think for everyone out there, it's a chance to rediscover not only who you are, but who do you want to be moving forward?
That's a fantastic statement.
The easy path is to become angry and bitter. I didn't want to be that guy.
But yet, it's not like you wanted to be that guy, but so many people end up that way.
Sure.
I interact with people all day long who are angry and bitter, and it's just tough. I mean, being compassionate, you understand it, but I feel like you have to make a decision and be intentional.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. You have to hit it head on. You can't run from it. It's not going away on its own.
That's so true.
I think we all know people that something happened to them in their past, whether it was an infidelity, something happened. They were betrayed by a friend. They were, robbed financially by a business associate, or whatever the case may be. And we all know people that they'll sit at the end of the bar Nobody wants to be around them because as soon as you get around them, they're like, well, let me tell you what happened 40 years ago. I'm like, dude, that's 40 years ago. And so you can imagine, bitter party of one, your table's ready. And I didn't want to be that guy. So I started a pursuit of how do I not become that? Because that's my easy path. I can get angry and I can be bitter without help. I mean, I'm there already. So how do I not become that person? And I think a lot of that is hitting your recovery head on. The trauma that you've experienced might need some expert help. Soldiers coming back from war that have PTSD, there are therapies available to help you deal with those triggers. The mind movies that you have playing in your head on an endless loop over and over and over again, there's help for that. But a lot of people don't know where to turn. And I think over the course of my recovery journey, I could probably teach a PhD level class on psychology now because I've learned so much about this stuff that I never wanted to know.
Right. So I think you've normalized so much for the betrayed male. Now I'm going to ask you to normalize something that's going to relate to them on a different level. Tell the viewing audience a couple of things you really did wrong.
Yeah.
Let's level the playing field.
Oh yeah. I think early on I was in total denial of all of this. I was in denial that this happened to me. I was in denial that my wife was even capable of thinking about it. Like I never could picture her in this position, but yet it happened multiple times.
Right.
That was just shocking and mind-boggling to me. So I didn't even want to believe it. So it took me a while to come to that realization, to come to grips with that.
Absolutely.
I think I also drank a little more than I normally did.
As did I.
And I wouldn't say that to the point of being a problem, but it wasn't a normal part of my everyday life as much as I was drinking. And
absolutely.
So, that also leads to, not making the best decisions. Mm-hmm. But the denial, I think, was a big problem. And I don't, the denial I had also was about denying that I had any problems. Not saying I'm using that as an excuse for what she did.
Right.
But I had a denial that I was ever a problem in our marriage.
So I'm going to point blank you with a question here that I think needs to be asked. I know that you have no problem answering the tough questions. Was it your fault that Melanie acted out and had these affairs?
No, I don't think it was my fault at all.
And I think it's absolutely vital to understand that. Now, let me ask you another question. Even though it wasn't your fault that she acted out and had these affairs, did this whole experience open up your eyes to some struggles, areas of improvement that needed to be transformed and worked on in your life, even if those things are there? Because I want to give you a chance to answer. Did that mean that it was still okay that she had these affairs?
Well, first of all, no, it's not okay that she had these affairs. I don't ever look at anything that I had done or didn't do as the reason for her acting out. But were there things that I need to own as a part of our relationship? Absolutely.
Well said.
I was never really emotionally available to her. I mentioned, the big three: happy, sad, and angry. That's all I knew that there was.
Yeah.
And I never would use the word "I feel" because that was never part of my everyday emotion. I would even tell her, "I don't feel, I think." And what it said to her was, wow, he's shutting off all emotion and is not going to be emotionally vulnerable to me because he's hiding behind this wall of logic. Yeah. Right. And I said earlier that, you would always find the reasoned, even keel, mature response from me. Well, that's probably a fancy way of saying I didn't care about emotion at all.
Yeah.
So I'm learning how to be more emotionally vulnerable with her, which I think is what she wanted all along. And now, from that perspective, I think our relationship is so much richer because we can talk more and interact more on an emotional level rather than just a surface or even an intellectual level. Now it's deeper. And, you know, I was probably naively unaware of how emotionally, I won't use the term needy, but just how much that meant to her in her interaction. And that's what she really wanted in the relationship. You know, I think for most guys, that's never a part of our emotion. You know, okay, we get married, you know, you start your career, you start building your family, you know, put money away for college. So you're working toward a goal, and you don't ever stop and think, well, do I need to course correct and maybe change some things, you know, of how I'm doing, especially if things are going your way.
Yeah,
right.
I call that being autopilot. You're just doing what you do.
Sure.
And here comes crisis and tragedy, and you'll never, by the grace of God, at least for me, I know that you feel this way, you never want to be on autopilot again.
No, never.
Because it means you're not present.
Never. Right. So we want to be intentional about the communication, the interaction on an emotional level now. And, you know, I talked about how our old style was withdraw. That's definitely not where we are now. We will talk about everything. And no matter what it is, we're going to talk about it. If it's sex, we're going to talk about it. If it's, you know, parenting, we're going to talk about it. What do you think about this? Well, I feel like, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about everything under the sun. We're not going to hide and, you know, withdraw anymore.
So I'm going to ask you to do this. If you were to reach out to the unfaithful female, she just doesn't know. She's feeling some of the things that you're feeling, lost. She's in her own car and just dealing with the rage, the sadness, the self-hatred, the anger at the spouse. She's dealing with all these things. What are some of the things that, and certainly, you know, Melanie did a lot of great things, but she probably did some things that didn't help as well. But if you were to give the unfaithful female some helpful pointers on what they can do to help their husband heal, whether he's a thinker or a feeler now, or whether he's a guy that lives in the gym and can bench press 500 pounds, I mean, It really doesn't matter.
Right.
What are some of the things that they can do to help their spouse heal?
Yeah, this is great, actually. You know, one of the things that I think kills the recovery more than anything is defensiveness.
Yeah.
When there are discussions, because there will be discussions about what happened.
Absolutely.
If you, as the unfaithful, get defensive, then what you're conveying to your spouse is that you're wrong and I'm right. Regardless of whether that's the case, you being defensive sets them back. And a lot of people talk about recovery as a roller coaster.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't look at it that way, because a roller coaster kind of denotes that it's a fairly smooth sine wave, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that. I call it chutes and ladders. So you're walking along and down the chute you go. You have to climb up the ladder just to get back to where you were.
Yeah.
Then you start trying to move forward. So it's not a nice smooth wave on the graph. I think you can go down the chute and then down the chute again and down the chute some more. So I look at it more like chutes and ladders than the wave. But I think defensiveness definitely takes the betrayed back to square one. Lies, even the smallest little lie, can take you back to square one. Because I think from what I've been able to gather in my recovery journey is that I think you can recover from the infidelity itself. The lies, to me, are what kills any hope of having a recovery.
Would you agree too that, one of the struggles that sometimes happens is they're not lying about infidelity, they're lying about where they were the other day.
Sure.
They're lying about what they ate, and then the husband finds a receipt that says, hey, you didn't have a burger, you had chicken strips.
Right.
And some people go, why is that such a big deal? But it's the deception, right?
Sure, and that's the pattern. And so when our gut was telling us we thought there was something going on, but then we were kind of made to feel like we're crazy.
Here we go again.
Here we go again.
What can I trust? What can I not
can't trust a thing. And right now, especially right after you find out, your words mean nothing.
If I can't trust you to be honest about what you ate or where you ran errands today, how can I expect you to be honest about whether or not you're going to relapse or have another affair, right?
Right, absolutely.
And Rick says this all the time. He says most people can actually forgive the sexual act or emotional act. It takes them longer to forgive the deception.
Right.
Would you agree as a betrayed male?
Oh, totally. Totally. The deception is the killer, I think.
What helped you regain trust? Now, we've put out an article, and it's a mile long about how to restore trust. But for you, and we didn't talk about this, so I'm going off script, which I love to do. What helped you regain trust in Melanie?
Yeah. So to me, the only way that can happen is to be honest and transparent, but to be consistent over time. Your honesty that you're kind of displaying right after D-Day, if you're totally honest with me, that's great. I don't believe it because I'm still trying to get my head around what happened. And like I said, words mean nothing at this point. Your actions mean everything. So if you tell me you're going to be somewhere and you give me your agenda, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then I find out, well, you really didn't go there, or you made a side trip, you might think it's a minor thing, but to me, it's total devastation because you've just deceived me once again.
And here we go again.
Here we go again. When are you going to stop deceiving me?
And when are you going to understand how this affects me?
Right.
I had to wake up because I didn't realize that when I wasn't completely honest with Samantha, it wasn't just here we go again, blah, blah, blah. I was wounding her.
Right.
And as a man, it still relates to how a man feels wounded, right?
Right.
Because it's a deviation from what you said you were going to do. And in your mind, you're one step away from now another affair.
Right.
And that seems ludicrous, but that's the way the betrayed thinks.
Right. And that's how quickly the dots can get connected. And now all of a sudden in my mind, you're off and
you're down the road with the guy having another year-long affair. And you just said something that's so brilliant. You just said, it's amazing how fast you, the betrayed, can connect the dots.
Oh, man.
We as unfaithful can be the most selfish, I think just, if I can say this, stupid people when we don't understand how quickly our actions, which we think mean nothing, can completely lead you down a road with incredible quickness, with lightning quick speed.
Totally.
And we then get upset with you.
Right.
It's probably one of the worst things that we can do. Would you agree?
Well, I would say it's the worst thing you could do.
Next to relapse. But in terms of working through repair work.
Trying to move forward, it really sets it back.
Absolutely.
Because, yes, with lightning quickness, those dots can get connected. And in some cases, those dots were never meant to be connected. I'm sitting in traffic. The guy cuts me off in front of me. And next thing you know, I've connected a dot somehow to infidelity and what my wife did. It had nothing to do with that guy that cut me off. I don't even know him. But just lightning fast, just like that, all of a sudden now I'm down a road and I want to call her up and say, we're getting divorced. I can't take it anymore.
That's such a good point because you just can't see him come.
No.
You can be as intentional and on guard as you want to be. You just can't see him coming.
Right.
And for a man, it's even probably more, if I'm right and speak to this, it's even a little bit more debilitating because you feel like, I'm big, strong man. Nothing should upset me. I should be able to conquer this. And here you are, a guy cuts you off, or you see a picture of a certain type of food,
Right.
or you hear a song and you're in tears.
Next thing you know, I'm bawling, curled up in the back of my truck. Yeah, what was that all about? Well, I mean, I think those are obviously some definitely overused stereotypes of the male-female type thing.
Sure.
But yeah, the way those dots get connected at lightning speed is, to me, I was totally unprepared for that. I like to be a planner. I like to, I'm going to plan for the contingencies, plan for the worst, hope for the best. You just don't see it coming.
No.
And next thing you know, it cuts me off under my knees and I'm on the ground again. And so, you want to get off of that roller coaster and you have a hard time getting off.
We didn't say this on the front end, but you actually are a friend to our organization, affairrecovery.com, because you are a group leader and lead these Harboring Hope groups for men. If you're new to the listening audience or are wondering what we're talking about, at affairrecovery.com, we have online groups. Harboring Hope is a 13-week online group specifically for betrayed spouses. And Rob helps lead some of our betrayed male group courses that I think you'll agree are life-changing. Why don't you share a couple of minutes about what that's done for you and what it's like to lead these groups?
Yeah, I always say that Harboring Hope is probably the best tool that I've found to help you work through all the layers of recovery that you need to work through. I never would have been able to meander the uncharted waters of recovery without a guide like Harboring Hope. And so as a student, when I was in the class, what it did for me was it helped me unpack all these things that I was feeling that I didn't even know about, didn't even know I was feeling. And now I can put not only a name to it, but I can also get some tools on how to actually work through that. Specifically, there were 3 chapters in the course that have meant the most to me. Those chapters are grieving, forgiveness, and letting go. I understand if you're early in the process, forgiveness is not on your mind.
Right.
But at some point, you're going to have to get there for yourself, not necessarily for your unfaithful spouse.
That's a great statement. You have to get there for yourself.
There. Yeah. But before you get to forgiveness, you got to realize, what are all the losses that I've actually incurred? Forgiveness is a canceling of debt. In order to cancel that debt, you've got to realize what is actually owed. The grieving process has really allowed me to list out all of those things that I've lost. And I've got a list that's got over 120 specific things on it.
And that's not to shame Melanie.
Not at all.
That's for your own healing.
That's for me. Yeah.
That's your own grieving.
Absolutely.
That's your own becoming present with the new Rob,
right,
in light of what's happened. But I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but maybe throw a caveat. That's not to shame, Melanie.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I think most of us were not given a good model for grief.
Absolutely
growing up.
Right.
Especially guys, you don't have the window of opportunity to grieve. You are told, okay, if you had a loss in your family, okay, if you're allowed to cry, don't let it happen very long. Now that you've done that, okay, done. You're over.
Get a drink and go to work.
Yeah, go back to work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of our societal view of grief. What I really came to understand with Harboring Hope is, wow, there are so many things that I've lost as a part of this infidelity that in some cases I didn't even realize. But as I worked through them, I put those on the list and I had to grieve them as a loss one by one. It's a long, slog through the mire, but it's totally worth it. Then that leads me to forgiveness, being able to say, you know what? I don't want any of this stuff that's happened to me to hold any power over me the rest of my life.
That's an awesome statement.
So I'm going to release that power that it's holding over me, And I'm going to say, I forgive you, but that's the gift that I'm giving myself. And at that point, it is so freeing. I'm free to do whatever now. I'm free to stay. I'm free to go. I'm free to live my life however I want to live it moving forward.
Because I'm healing.
I'm healing, and I'm not chained to the weight that's been dragging me down for so long. And I think the people that get angry and bitter don't use that forgiveness process to cut the chain on that weight and just let it go.
The problem is this is an audio only interview, and I want to pound the table with shouts of yes and amen and brother, you are right, because there's such great humble truth in what you're saying. Talk about the aspect of being with other men and just a safe place.
Yeah, I think, like I said early on in our interview, the isolation that men feel, it's really debilitating. And the first few calls on the groups that I have led, the number one comment I get was, wow, these guys get what I'm going through. It's so great to be around a group of guys that they know. I don't have to explain. They know, they can hear me because they're going through the same thing I'm going through.
And they're not shaming you for feeling what you're feeling.
No, not
they're
at all.
saying, I get it, dude.
Yeah, I'm going through the same thing. Yeah.
Or what about this? What about this?
Yeah.
You know, me, when I'm with other unfaithful men, there's moments where we're like, dude, what about when you did this? And then, she feels that. You're just like, oh. And so I know it's the same way. And I just want to appeal to men all over the world. If you've got an internet connection, if you can get online, go look at Harboring Hope. I just appeal to you. It's not super expensive. There's actually scholarships you can apply for. But learn from what Rob has gone through. This is one of the safest places, safest courses in the entire internet world for a betrayed male spouse. Would you agree?
I totally agree. In a place where there's nowhere else to turn, not only is this a safe place, but the coursework, the material, to me, has been the number one thing I really attribute my recovery to, because it has helped me unpack all the things that I need to unpack. Going back through it as a leader allows me to hit the material again in a different spot of my recovery. The grieving part, I never really paid a whole lot of attention to when I was there as a student, but when I went back as a leader, I thought, oh, this is important. I need to spend some time on this. And so over the next several groups that I've led, it kind of allowed me to really unpack all of that and come up with my list of losses. So I can't say enough good things about Harboring Hope, because to me, it's the best thing out there.
One of the brave things that I think is so admirable about what you are doing is, we kind of say it this way, whether you come from faith or whether you're an atheist, you have been healed to now help others heal. And it's such a great truth that it's a little different for me, right? Because I blew up my own life and I'm not sitting here going, yeah, we're going to give back. It's kind of like I sheepishly make these videos and go, man, God, please help people that are going through probably the worst crisis of their life. It's a little bit different. With you, there's such a sense of, look, it is heroic for a betrayed, and I know you would never say this about yourself, but for you as a man who are trying to give back to other men, it's heroic that you would allow the healing in your life to then give back to other men who are so lost and confused and isolated, who are trying to heal. So what I want you to do, and I do this with every guest that I have an interview with, I want you just to take 2 minutes and I want you just to speak from your heart to the betrayed male that's out there, who just in all corners of the world. I mean, when you were in that truck, if you were able to turn on an interview like this, man, what do you think you needed to hear?
So you had a couple things there. One was about giving back. I look at my story, and I don't want my story to exist in a vacuum. To me, if that's the case, then it's just a painful experience. No, I want there to be some purpose and some meaning to what happened. And if I can take my story and potentially encourage someone else or point someone else in a right direction, just like I was pointed by someone who had experienced it, that's, to me, the proper way to view all of this. I want to pay it forward. I want to be able to give back and to help. I don't consider myself being in some great place of healing. I consider myself, maybe I'm a couple steps ahead of where you are today. I'm still on a journey, and it's probably going to be a lifelong journey. But I'm not at the same point I was at 2.5 years ago when my world blew up. There is healing. It's available. I would encourage you wholeheartedly to get involved. Don't bear this alone, because I think the further you isolate yourself, the harder it's going to become. But as a betrayed person, whether you're male or female, doesn't matter. I think at this point, you've got to take a look at and do an inventory of your life. Do I want this to define who I am, or do I want it to refine who I am? And if I want to take the angry, bitter road, that's the easy path. But that's not where I want to be, and I don't think that's where most people want to be. We mentioned faith earlier. I do come from a faith background. I tend to believe that nothing is wasted in God's economy. So if he can take what happened to me and encourage someone else, then who am I to stop that? So, but one of the other things for men especially, I think a lot of people will tell you that you're a fool to stay. If you've been given the ability to stay, if your wife hasn't left, because that happens a lot of times, if you have the ability to stay, you are not a fool to stay and be a part of the redemptive work in someone's life.
And I think it's so prevalent that any betrayed spouse, male or female, is shamed for staying. The new shame is to shame a betrayed for staying rather than honor them and rather than esteem them. And I get tarred and feathered even for calling Samantha heroic sometimes by some crazy people out there. But if you're a betrayed spouse, Rob and I want you to understand that this is an opportunity for your life to become richer. This is an opportunity for your life to be transformed. There is no shame in staying. There's no shame in leaving an abusive situation with an unfaithful spouse that refuses to change, refuses to respect your boundaries. Rob, I just want to thank you for coming in today. This has been riveting. This has been educational, just for me to hear more about the world of the betrayed male. And I just want to invite you, if you're listening, go to affairrecovery.com right now. Look at the free boot camp. Look at Harboring Hope. If you're an unfaithful, look at Hope for Healing. There's so many free resources out there. This isn't a money grab. If you just used the free resources, they would change your life. So Rob, thanks for coming in. You've been an incredible guest. It's been such a joy for all of us.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate the time.